All right, thanks for joining us. We're going to do a series today on voice search. So I'm Chris, I'm with Union Street Media. Thanks for joining us. And today we have a very special guest here, Ted Adler. He is our founder and president of Union Street Media, and he's recently wrote a blog post called 1031 on the Union Street Media website that talks a lot about voice search and where it's going here in the future for real estate and for search in general.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so voice search is something that I've been really interested in for some time now, in large part because it's kind of totally changing the way that people look for information. And I think like just to sort of start with, I have been a long time Siri user. Like I walk around the house like dictating to my phone constantly. My wife thinks I'm a little bit crazy, which
She's right.
she's probably right. But basically it's just a very easy way to communicate. And I'm a more verbal communicator, and so given the option of like trying to seek out information, I would rather ask somebody something than like go look it up and type it up. So my sort of, from the get-go, voice was something that was really interesting to me. And now I'm kind of seeing how it's starting to roll out across the search landscape, and it's incredibly powerful where it's going. To kind of put it into context, about 1 out of 5 searches right now is a voice-activated search. So that could be, somebody, using Google Assistant in their car. It could be, talking to Siri on your phone. It could be talking to Alexa. Like in whatever context, right? About 1 out of 5 searches is now currently voice activated. By 2020, they expect that half of searches are going to be voice activated. So the way that people are looking for information is totally changing. Furthermore, like the results as they appear, and this is what that sort of 1031 post is all about, is totally changing. In that, in the past, rewind to like, when people first discovered this thing called Google, you would go and you'd type like Burlington home for sale, right? Or something along the lines of that, right? Yeah. And you would have 10 results that would appear on the homepage of a Google, search engine result page. And you, by the way, you can still get those if you go to one of those computers where you have to type on a keyboard and look at a screen.
Desktop. Yep,
yeah. So it does still exist, right? Yeah. Then, along comes mobile, right? And so now, people can either dictate into, a phone, or of course in most cases they're probably still typing it out, but the screen is a lot smaller, right? And so you really are only getting 3 results on that homepage, that search engine result page.
That you can see, yeah.
Exactly. But what now happens with voice is if you go to Siri and you say, Siri, find me this, right? Or if you like run a search using Siri like in a browser. Or Alexa, or
or Google
or
Home.
Google Home or whatever, right? It will send you back 1 result. So whereas in the past, like, you had a 1 in 10 chance of getting on the homepage, right? Now you have a 1 in 3 chance on mobile. Once you move into the voice world, it's 1 result. And it's either going to be you or it's your competitor.
Yep.
And so the importance for a broker to get in front of that, or really like anyone, is huge. Because what's going to happen is when half of searches are searched that way, people are going to land on 1 result, and their propensity to then continue to search for others is going to diminish.
Yeah. And that's the real problem with voice search for a lot of people is how do I get into that answer box?
Absolutely.
Essentially.
Yeah.
What Google's doing these answer boxes now where it's just, here's your answer, here's the 1 result. So that makes it, a really difficult medium to get into now. Like it's really hard to get into those search results now. So what do you do?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways to go about sort of tackling that problem, right? And the first is that we've been working with clients where we've been setting up what are called AMP pages. So if you actually run a search, and you've landed you're in Google on your phone only, and sometimes you see a little thunderbolt next to an article. These are generally articles that you might see that are like news sources. If you Google a politician's name, something like that, like you'll land on an AMP page. So we have been starting to create AMP pages for real estate brokers. And what we're doing is the infrastructure behind this is like very high-powered infrastructure. It looks to Google like we are loading a quality content page akin to like the New York Times, right? The second thing is that Google really likes it because it's staying within the Google interface, right? So you see the result and then you click on it, but it still says Google at the top. And then, furthermore, you can spin these up for like very specific long tail searches. Part of what is really changing in how the difference between a desktop search and a mobile search and a voice search is that people look for things in different ways. So I'll give you an example. My wife and I spent 3 years down in Boston while she was doing her residency. And at the time, we were looking for a rental. And coming from here in Vermont, having like outside access was really important. Like we wanted to be able to have a little grill, like go outside, cook, do that kind of thing.
Oh, right, yeah, backyard.
Yeah, backyard. Well, there's no such thing as a backyard in Boston, right? But what we were looking for very specifically was like a 1-bedroom apartment in the Beacon Hill area that had direct outside access. And so that's the kind of thing that if you were talking to a real estate broker, you would say that to them, right? You would say, hey, I'm looking for a 1-bedroom in Boston's Back Bay with direct outside access for less than $3,000, right? Back then it was quite a bit less. The market in Boston's picked up a lot, right? Yeah. So the point is that that's a very different search. Now, if you're trying to search for, sort of like on your phone or on your desktop, you might just type in like Back Bay real estate, right? Or Beacon Hill real estate, or Beacon Hill apartment for rent. And then you're digging and searching from there. Yeah. So because the search query is different, right? It's much longer, right? You have to have different pages and different content on your site that then correspond with that result. Yeah. And so the whole name of the game becomes like, how do I get like enough content on my site, enough content kind of that sort of addresses some of these very specific searches, and also content that corresponds with basically a verbally dictated search as opposed to a conventional desktop search.
Yeah. So are AMP pages the answer to that?
AMP pages AMP pages are one of the answers.
I don't think there's a solution to this right now. I've watched a few people talk about voice search, and everybody sort of looks at it like, we're asking it for specific information. We're asking it for factoids. Yeah. And rarely are we finding people like searching on voice search. We're asking it questions. We're with our kids and asking it for when where's the president from, or very
Mars.
Basic questions. Yeah. So it's not really working for just searching for a home in Back Bay or a real estate broker.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, like the technology is constantly improving, right? And Siri, or any of these tools, the more you use them, the better they become at responding. And over time, I think that's going to change. So I wouldn't look at kind of the results that you're seeing right now as a snapshot in time, and then just sort of believing that that is what you're going to see for perpetuity.
It's going to evolve.
It's going to evolve. Yeah. And I think the other thing to kind
smarter people will figure out how to make it work.
Yes, people much smarter than you and I, right? The other thing I think that you're going to find with it is that basically the work that you have to do to optimize your site, there's really kind of a way to think about it is you have the pre-voice world, right? And then you have the post-voice world, right? And a lot of the work that you do to get your site optimized for the post-voice world has actually a lot of pre-voice benefits, right? So it's not it's not necessarily mutually exclusive one or the other. Yeah. And so the kind of work that we're doing on behalf of our clients is actually having a pretty broad and wide benefit in really all searches.
Well, we're big believers in hyperlocal content, right? Yeah. We're big believers in setting up content for long tail searches, which is sort of what you're talking about with voice search.
Absolutely, because a voice search is a more specific search. There's more words to it. The other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that about half of the searches that are run each year by Google on Google have never been run before.
Yeah, and that's only going to get that's only going to get worse as we go through, and people are literally talking into it because you were just talking to Siri, asking it to find a broker in the area, and the way you were asking it is not the way anybody would type. Very long.
So I basically just asked Siri, what, and I said, interesting, I said what as opposed to who, but I said, what is the best broker in Burlington, Vermont to find me a hill section home for sale, right? And the hill section is, of course, the sort of higher end part of town. It's right around our building here. We've
talked about it in other videos before.
I was pretty psyched to see a couple of our clients pop up on that page above Zillow.
Yeah, because they own that area.
Correct.
I've got a lot of content about the Hills section. That's
Yeah.
a question that at least there's content around, so they can pull up some people who actually have pages about the Hills section
Exactly.
of Burlington.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're probably going to ask even deeper, more defined questions like the one you asked about Back Bay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you're asking for a specific house. You
Yeah,
know?
and I think that the other thing that we're gonna so besides that sort of concept of like 10-3-1, right, and kind of like the change, right, and the evolution of this going from about 1 out of 5 searches to like 5 out of to like half the searches that are getting run, people are gonna also kind of interact with the devices differently. One of the things that they've found is that, like sort of psychologists have studied this, and they've looked at if you're actually talking to a device, to a thing, like if you have something that's like on the table that you can kind of look at, like if I'm looking at your phone or I'm looking at my phone, I actually kind of like am interacting with the device. I will use language differently than if I was talking to just to a human, right? And so, and when you're going to get to the point where you're just going to be like walking around your house and you're going to say, hey, we're out of diapers, right? And then Siri is going to, or sorry, Alexa actually will probably literally place the order. It'll hear what you're saying, right? And
Ask
it might,
you if you want the order.
hey, do you want me to, ship you some diapers? And quite frankly, most of the marital disputes that I think people end up in are when, guys like us are asked to do something and then we forget to do it.
Right.
So, I mean, I would be like, hey, please send me those diapers, right?
I think one of the most highly used skills of Alexa is the grocery list.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you're ordering.
Totally.
I mean, it's easy to buy stuff
Exactly.
with Alexa.
Very easy.
Searching for stuff, I think it's still hard to understand how it's all going to shake
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Well, and that's the cool thing. I mean, part of why what attracted me to the internet, right, in the last millennium, which is, by the way, how old I am, was basically
106.
Yeah, how did you know? I look pretty good, right?
Right.
No, definitely is how like basically the online world, right, impacted the offline world, right? And so when I got going on this stuff in like the late 90s, like that was like it was like the concept was super powerful, right?
Sure.
And now it's like kind of quaint. You're like, oh, I mean, what is the difference between the online world and the offline world, right? They're one and the same at this point, right? And I think that this voice search is just kind of the next evolution in that change that we've witnessed over the last like 20 years. And that's why I still come in every day super excited about what we're doing, because it never ends.
Yeah.
And that constant change, that sort of striving for like innovation and like the next thing is fascinating and super super fun to be part of.
Really interesting. Yeah. And I know that we're gonna do a couple more of these videos, and we're gonna have Todd, who is our director of engineering over here, and he has been putting together things where they will allow you to enable a website as a skill on Alexa. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but it would send you results. So you would ask it for things, and it will send you results.
Yeah.
Now, on top of it, like, using natural language search, having a search bar on your website where you can just talk into it, and that website is capable of using voice search.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily using Alexa, but you're using your mobile phone to search for things without actually having to type it in.
Yeah, I mean, certainly like...
Because in a mobile device, typing is very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
But talking is not, and you have found that now that's the way you do everything on your mobile device.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that one of the things I like to say is that that writing is really hard. Watching a movie is pretty easy, which is maybe why they're sitting and watching the two of us on a couch talk to each other. But the other thing in my case, like over the last year, I was actually in a pretty bad bike accident. And as a result, like I had to really change how much screen time I had.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up, but I was worried that you would be
No, I'm all good. I'm all good. But so basically, like I was sort of pushed into this quite a bit sooner than I probably would have. And so as a result, like I've changed the way that I interact with my devices. And you're absolutely right. Like when I go to a site, like if there's something where I can like dictate into it for search, right? as opposed to having to like choose like bedrooms 3, bathrooms 2, like town name, click, right? I mean, that's like that's just that, if you think about in hindering the engagement of a user that comes to your site, like the natural language search, I mean, that is industry standard now, whether it's like, with, what we do or Zillow, Trulia,
Well,
anything
you're
like
training
that.
people.
Exactly.
You're training people to use voice search, and so as they get more comfortable with it, that becomes the default setting for people when they go to a website. They're looking to do that first rather than type it in, because it was interesting. Somebody was talking. I was reading a blog about how your mobile device is actually a better computer than your desktop, even though it doesn't have the processing speed and it can't do the things a desktop can do. Because it knows where you are and how close you are to other things and how you move and how you operate, it knows a lot more about the world around it. And so it offers a lot more opportunities. So you're going to end up using your mobile device a lot more. Same thing with voice. As you start realizing how easy it is to actually operate that way, then you look for a website that operates along with that and goes with the easiest route, right? Like we're all lazy. I'm lazy. You're not lazy.
No, I'm
you're
lazy.
The founder and president of the company,
I appreciate that.
Obviously such a hard worker. But that's the way.
So
people want to work.
Well, and I'll give you an example. Like I worked on a construction crew in college, right? And one of the things it's true. And one of the things that was really interesting was anything that you could do to use a machine to make the job easier, you would do, right? And so when I first got there and I first started working with these guys, I found it super peculiar. They would like literally move the truck like an extra like 4 feet so that they had to carry something a little bit less, right? And on the one hand, I'm like, seriously, like, are we that lazy?
Right for the job.
Exactly. But the flip side of it is like, no, like these guys are being super efficient, right? They're thinking about like everything that they have to do in the process to create the outcome that they were looking for, right? And so it's the same thing with any device, right? We're going to use the tool like over time to get the outcome that we want, and we're going to use it in the most efficient manner, right, in order to get that outcome. And as the tool learns, in this case, like, unlike your pickup truck, right, it doesn't necessarily know where to park, right? Actually, it will pretty soon know where to park. I often say to my wife that my 4-year-old will never drive a car because the car will drive him, which, by the way, if you had a 16-year-old, wouldn't you totally prefer to have your 16-year-old like be driven by a car as opposed to drive it, right?
I don't know about that.
Did you just see me driving at 16? Anyway, my point is it's like all of that stuff is going to change. So as you use the devices more often, they're going to become sort of more used to how you use them, and they are going to become more efficient, and you're going to therefore use it more often in that capacity. I mean, I think like it's not far off from the world of the desktop computer. I mean, it's going to be the kind of thing that you'll see in like a collector shop. That's where it's all going to go to this.
Right. Yeah. So we'll talk about that. Like we'll have a few more videos, and we'll talk about. We'll have Todd in here, and he can talk a little bit about how we're engineering for voice search. Some of the products that we want to put out for voice search, or that we think other people are going to put out for voice search, not just a Union Street Media thing. And also talk about like keywords, right? Because like I had brought this up to you when we were prepping for this thing, where we were saying like, it's not really search engine optimization anymore, because in some cases you might not have to worry about a search engine as much as you have to worry about keywords and managing your keywords, and what keywords do you want to be associated with, and what keywords don't you want to be associated with, what keywords are going to be easier for you to be a part of the search result, rather than the keywords where it's like, I need a recipe for apple pie. Well, that's something that you do want to be associated with, whereas maybe the conversion from quarts to pints is something where I can just give you an answer for that. Alexa can just give you an answer, so don't bother producing all this content around something that's an easy answer.
Correct.
Produce content around something that's a little more amorphous, a little more conceptual, because that's where you've got a chance of actually being relevant.
Well, absolutely. And then also, once you create that more unique content, right, and then you land on your site, like you're showing to the person that's coming that you really are a local expert, right, and that you really have something like valuable to share,
Well, we got into that whole thing.
and they're more likely to stick around and dig deeper.
When we did the hyper-local series, we got into that whole thing where we
Absolutely.
were talking about, having content that positions you as an expert in whatever it is, a town, a neighborhood, a specific property type, whatever it is. And I think that's, only going to get more and more important as we get into voice search.
Yeah.
So I think that's it, right? Is there
Yeah.
anything you want to say hi to the family at home, or do you want to say hi to the White Sox? He's a Chicago White Sox man. He lives in Vermont, and he's a Chicago White Sox
it's sort of like it's kind of like a bad gene, right? My dad had flat feet, and he was a White Sox fan, and I got both of those.
Right. Good.
So,
Oh, wow. Right. Yeah. Because your dad was from Chicago.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Here we are.
A couple of guys from Connecticut, New Jersey, in Vermont, talking about search. So, for Union Street Media, for the Honorable Founder and President Ted Adler, and for me, I'm Chris Badami. Join us next time, and we will have our next video on voice search. Thanks for joining us.